Very good morning. It's 8:01. Should we start the meeting?
Yes, let's go.
All right. I'm going to read the statement. Good morning, board, staff, and members of the public. After my statement, the chairman will open the meeting and explain the rules for this electronic meeting. Please keep your microphone on mute when you're not speaking. The technical support team may proactively mute participants if the microphone is picking up background noise. Board members should check to make sure the microphone is not muted before speaking. You may text me at 202-316-0030 at any time during the meeting. If you need technical support, an IT tech will call your cell to assist. I will now turn the meeting over to Chairman Sultan to read the legal statement and open the meeting.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let's call this meeting to order. In accordance with Governor's State of Emergency Declaration and executive orders regarding the COVID-19 pandemic, the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors Continuity Ordinance and General Assembly 2020 Budget Amendments 28 and 137, Loudoun Water will meet today in an electronic meeting. In compliance with these special procedures, only action items necessary to continue operations of Loudoun Water and the discharge of its lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities will be discussed during today's meeting. Reports and other meeting information are available on board docs. Public notice and meeting information was provided on the Loudoun Water website. A recording of the meeting will be available in board docs at the following link: go.boarddocs.com/va/LWVA/board.nsf. Board members wishing to speak are reminded to press unmute and identify themselves by name so that staff can accurately capture comments. All items will be recommended to the October 8th, 2020 board meeting. The board secretary will now take a roll call of attendance of committee members.
Thank you. Mr. Sultan?
Here.
Mr. Bonfils?
Here.
Mr. Moody?
Here.
Ms. Sistercar? Ms. Sistercar?
Yes, here.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving to the agenda now.
Okay, the next agenda item is approve the agenda. Do I have a motion?
I second that.
Okay, roll call vote. Mr. Sultan?
Yes.
Mr. Bonfils?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Ms. Sistercar?
Yes.
Thank you. We'll now move.
Okay, let's move to the first action item, the water construction contract for Goose Creek Water Supply Integration.
Good morning.
Morning.
This is Pam, and I haven't met everyone in person yet, but I'm the Director of Water Resources, and I've been working with Kathleen Witten and the Hazen team for the last couple of years on this project, and I wanted to take this opportunity, we'd like to take this opportunity to refresh the purpose of the project and the strategic value of it as we award the recommendation of the construction contract. All right, let's see if I can move it to the next slide.
Go ahead and request control, Pam.
All right, that's what I forgot to do.
I see it.
I got it. Thank you. You can. All right. All right. So first off, it's important to understand that this project is really a water supply resiliency project. And that is because our primary source is the Potomac River. And we get all of our supply through ourselves and Fairfax Water from the Potomac River, and the Goose Creek assets provide a backup to that supply. So we're going to talk a little bit about resiliency and, as I mentioned, the purpose of the project. And I want to make special note of some of the permitting requirements that are associated with this project. So since our supply is primarily the Potomac River, we have constructed all of our assets from the Potomac raw water pumping station back to Trap Rock. That's the yellow line that you see on this graphic. Shows you the raw water transmission main that takes the water from the Potomac to the Trap Rock treatment plant. In the event of, there are probably two primary issues or concerns, threats that we would have associated with the Potomac River, and those have to do with extreme low flows or drought, or spills or very bad water quality in the river. So these types of occurrences are the ones that would threaten the Potomac supply, could potentially impact Fairfax Water as well as ourselves. And that is why the Goose Creek assets, the Goose Creek Reservoir and Beaver Dam Creek Reservoir, provide such a wonderful redundancy for our system. As you know, when we bought those facilities back in 2014, we have been keeping the Goose Creek water treatment plant wet. After we continued using it and after Trap Rock came online, we've been maintaining them in a standby condition, but it's a very old plant. And we recognized that we could probably better bolster our system if we could get a direct connection from that supply that we could treat at the Trap Rock water treatment plant. So this is what this project really is all about. It's using the proximity of the two systems, and I'm going to show you this very little green area right here by connecting the existing intake at the Goose Creek raw water pumping station to our Trap Rock raw water transmission main. We can actually get the water from the Goose Creek system to the Trap Rock water treatment plant in an emergency. So that's the essence of this project. It's making that very small connection from the pumping station to our new raw water line, and it enables us to utilize the Goose Creek supplies to supply Trap Rock in an emergency. And once the Milestone Reservoir is online and that can serve in this function that we're talking about, we're sure that we're going to be able to look at additional ways that we can tap into the value of the Goose Creek and Beaver Dam reservoirs as redundancy to the Milestone Reservoir. Something unique about this project, and it's a fairly complicated thing, is the permit that we needed to obtain from DEQ to both construct these facilities, and that's all of the facilities that you saw on that graph. It's the raw water intake, the transmission mains, Trap Rock, as well as Milestone Reservoir. So this is a 15-year permit. It was first issued in November of 2012. We had to make several modifications to it as the design drawings were actually completed. So there was a minor modification early on, and then when some of the other design drawings were completed, we needed to make another modification. And then here we are, after we brought Trap Rock online, we needed to modify it yet again for this project to enable this emergency water supply connection. Just to let you know, once we are at that point that we have design drawings in hand, it's likely we're going to need to modify it yet again to incorporate any design changes from those initial concepts that were included in the initial permit application. And then in 2027, the permit has 15-year duration, so we'll be looking to renew it. With all of these facilities in mind, it'll probably be much more focused on operation rather than construction. But it's complicated, and I think that it's a 26-page permit, and 20 pages of those are special conditions for the various projects. And as Kathleen kind of walks through, our choices in this project, the decisions that we made, and the bids that we received, it's possible that the complexity of this permit may have impacted some of the bids. So I think with that, Kathleen, let's turn it over to you.
Thanks, Pam. Do we want to pause for questions before Pam hands it over to me? Are there any questions so far on why we decided to do this project?
Hi,
No,
this is Keith.
I'm good.
Oh, go ahead, Marty. Just had a question you want to ask.
No,
Go
I'm
ahead.
saying I'm good. Go ahead.
Oh, yes, this is Keith Moody. I want to ask a question. You mentioned about the complexity related to special permissions. What are some of the risks that Loudoun Water will be taking on in terms of, or will you be getting in that? We're dealing with these special permissions from DEQ.
Yeah, what it is it's just very comprehensive. It covers everything from sediment and erosion control to impacts to streams, wetlands, and I'm trying to think, everything that is associated with water during construction. It covers that. It covers our operation, how much we can withdraw, when we can withdraw, total withdrawals for the year. It has all kinds of things that could be risks to us, but we fully understand the terms of the permit, and so I would say Loudoun Water is very well positioned to deal with this permit over its lifetime, because we've taken an active part, frankly, in constructing it. So yes, it has risks, but I feel that Loudoun Water is very well prepared to deal with the risks associated with our operation.
Are there, this Keith again, are there any unique mitigation steps that are associated with this, the complexity related to this permit?
This time for this modification and this project, we really tried to minimize the impacts that we were going to have. I think, I'm not sure that we enumerated those on the slides this morning, but we needed to purchase some mitigation credits, but they were very minimal. Kathleen, do you have any recall of, I think it was a very small
0.07 acres
of wetland mitigation, right?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
all right, thank you.
Yeah, so the project actually has very minor impacts.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right. Thanks, Pam. Before I start, I just wanted to let the board know that Aaron Duke from Hazen is here today to help me with any specific technical questions if I don't know. Just wanted to let you know that he can help me out. So Pam talked about why Loudoun Water needs this project for raw water redundancy, resiliency. But there were multiple different ways we could have provided the resiliency to get the water from Goose Creek Reservoir and Beaver Dam Reservoir to Trap Rock. So the first one is obviously just keep the Goose Creek Water Treatment Facility in standby mode. I mean, that's what it's doing now. And we did invest a lot of money in those assets. We paid about $30 million in 2014 to purchase Goose Creek, the reservoir, the water treatment facility, the Beaver Dam Reservoir, and the WNOD transmission main. And then we put about $17 million into the rehabilitation of Beaver Dam Creek Dam. And then when we first purchased Goose Creek and we were running it at 12-hour shifts, we put about $1 million into it then, just to get it to have SCADA and to be able to be more easily operated. So that was something that we looked into. However, to get the Goose Creek Water Treatment Facility, which was originally installed in 1959 and had an update in the 70s, I think, to get it to where we want it to be today to use. It was going to cost about $15 to $17 million to make those improvements. And we felt like we had a brand new water treatment facility right across the creek in Trap Rock. That's state of the art. So why would we invest that money in the Goose Creek water treatment facility when we already had something? So we started looking at, well, how do we get water from the Goose Creek Reservoir to Trap Rock? And the first thing we thought of, we already have some portable water pumps that we could just put on the bank of the reservoir in an emergency. But when we started really digging into that, we realized the amount of water that we would need to push to Trap Rock in an emergency. We would have to have diesel fuel trucks every day coming to the bank of our reservoir to refill these pumps and generators. That didn't really make any sense. And the amount of temporary piping we would need to get from the temporary pumps up to Trap Rock was a large amount, and we really didn't have anywhere to store that. And the amount of time it would take to put that piping system together, it didn't make any sense to go that route. So then we looked at, well, what could we do that was a little bit more permanent? And so we thought about, either tunneling under the Goose Creek Reservoir or doing a horizontal directional drill under the Goose Creek Reservoir. And then we kind of came up with an idea that was a little bit different for Loudoun Water, which is put the pipe on the bottom of the reservoir. Can we just run it across? So we looked at all three options, and the tunnel bore under the creek was expensive, and it was going to take a while to build. And one of the main drivers for this project is schedule. I mean, the quicker we can have resiliency, the better. So the tunnel was kind of out. When we looked at HDD, it was less expensive, but it had a lot of environmental impacts. We were going to have to take out trees on both sides of the reservoir in order to have the amount of laydown area necessary to fuse all that pipe together to get it to go under the creek. And it just didn't seem like it was a good option for us to take out trees on the side of our reservoir. So we proceeded with the pipe on the bottom of the reservoir, and that's what this project is. So are there any questions about the alternatives that we went through and how we got to this point? All right. So the project itself, so the Goose Creek Water Treatment Facility is over here, right off of Belmont Ridge Road. And the Goose Creek Intake Pump Station is right down here on the reservoir bank. So the existing raw water transmission main runs right here to Trap Rock. And this project, like Pam said, we're just connecting the existing pump station to the existing transmission main. So it's about 800 feet of pipe. We are also including some air release valves, a couple of check valves, replacing in the existing intake pump station. We're adding a couple more butterfly valves, and we're going to install a flow meter vault so we know how much water we're pulling out of the Goose Creek Reservoir and sending to Trap Rock. We also included a boat ramp with this project, as we don't currently have a way to get onto the reservoir, and we assumed that the contractor would need one in order to install the pipe. And we also threw in the relining of a stormwater pond at Trap Rock. Mr. Sultan, did you have a question?
Yeah, just an old water guy asking a question. What are you aiming at on the raw water main? Is there an existing fitting, or are you tapping into it?
So Sue Bauer, when she was doing the transmission main project, they actually did a change order on that project and left a T there for us. And they did some pre-blasting. So there's a T and a valve, and it's going to be fairly easy for us to connect to. The raw water main, though, as you can see, is a 42-inch, and we're going to connect to it with a 24-inch ductile. So there'll be a reducer.
Oh, okay. That's just an old water guy question.
That's a good one. It made it easier for us. We didn't have to do any shutdowns of that raw water transmission main, really.
Okay, good, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. So because of the coronavirus, I couldn't have a normal pre-bid meeting. Normally, when we put a project out to bid, we meet with the interested contractors on the site. We walk the site. We answer any questions that they have. But because of the limit of only 10 people together in a group because of the pandemic, couldn't do that this year. So I hired Apertures, and they did a drone video of the site, and I actually did a virtual pre-bid meeting. I basically took a video of myself talking to the video of the drone footage and posted that online for contractors to view, and then gave them the option of making an appointment to meet me out there to see the site if they still wanted more information. So I'm going to play a portion of that video for you and kind of walk you through the site so you can get an idea of what it looks like too. So here's the greenway. Trap Rock's at the top of the hill. So this is where the boat ramp is going to go into the reservoir, basically right where the finished water main and the force main from Trap Rock, the tunnel was. So this is all cleared because that's where they ran those two mains. But as you can see, this is a pretty steep hill. So we're having the contractor install a gravel access road down to the boat ramp down this hill. And this excavator that's out there, Hensel Phelps, is on site right now trying to bore under the greenway to get their sewer main across. But as you can see, this is the access from Trap Rock that we're going to have to use. So the other part of the project is the pipeline crossing. And here's the existing intake pump station. We're putting the pipe right across over to the raw water transmission main. Now we're flying from the west bank to the east bank. So we're going over towards the pump station. And you can see how wide the creek is here. It's about 500 feet. And you can see all these wetlands. This is the portion of the wetland that we're going to impact that we had to buy those mitigation credits for. Again, we're flying from west to east, and I just wanted you to see how steep this bank is on this side. It's basically a cliff face. So the contractors wanted to come out and see how steep it really was to see how they would access this point. You can see this orange barrel right here. That's approximately where the pipe is going to turn and go across the creek. But you can see the access on this side to the pump station is good. That's how we currently access the pump station and do maintenance. So now we're going to fly back from the east bank to the west bank. And the west bank is a lot less steep, but it is heavily wooded. So we will be taking out, I think, a 40-foot wide swath of trees in order to put in our pipeline. So that was the video. There's a longer video if anybody is interested on our Loudoun Water YouTube site. You can go view. This was just a snippet. Oops. So here's a plan and profile view of the project itself. So you can see the intake pump stations over here on the right-hand side. It's all existing, and right now it pumps water up the hill to the Goose Creek Water Treatment Facility. And the raw water transmission main is over here. And so this black line is what the project is. We're basically coming out of the existing valve vault at the pump station and coming out and turning, going down the steep slope, that cliff face that I showed you, through those wetlands and across the creek. So if you look in profile view, we're coming out of the pump station and we're diving down that cliff. And then we're popping out of the ground, basically in the water. And then we're going to lay the pipe on the bottom of the reservoir, go back underground, and then go back up the hill and connect into the existing raw water main. So something I wanted to talk about here is Loudoun Water typically uses ductile iron pipe for all their water mains. So we're using ductile iron coming out of the pump station. And then around this point, we're going to change to HDPE. So that's a plastic pipe, and it's more flexible. Obviously, it's not going to corrode like ductile would in the water, and it's less expensive. So when we did our geotechnical work, we did some borings within the reservoir. And what we found was there's about a 10-foot layer of silt, so like alluvial muck at the bottom of the reservoir. So we're assuming that this pipe that we're going to lay on the bottom is going to sink about 12 inches. So we really need the flexibility of the plastic, because we're not 100% sure how much it's going to settle, how fast it's going to settle, but we want to make sure that when it does settle, it's not going to rip out of the ground. So we're leaving some slack in here when we put the pipe in, and then we're putting 2 large concrete anchors, one on either side of the reservoir, so that if it does move any, at least it's not going to rip itself out. So with that, there are 2 ways of getting the pipe onto the bottom of the reservoir, and we didn't dictate which method the contractor had to choose. They could either pull the pipe along the bottom, so basically they would fuse all of their plastic pipe together, put their concrete ballast anchors around the pipe, and then attach the pipe to this sled, and then they would basically just winch the sled across the bottom of the reservoir. That was one option. Or they could float and sink. So basically they would assemble the whole pipeline, put their ballast on, and then have a barge pull the whole assembly out into the water, and then start filling that pipe with water to sink it down to the bottom. All of the contractors that bid on this job actually picked the float and sink method, but it's up to the contractor to choose which method they preferred. Either way, the pipe is acceptable. So something to note here is Loudoun Water has never done a marine pipeline construction before, so this was unique for us, and I think it was a little bit unique for the industry. There are some complexities with it. So final part of this project is the boat ramp. So I sort of explained why we're doing a boat ramp, but I wanted to go in a little more detail. So our existing access to the reservoir is way down here. So this is the face of the Goose Creek Dam. And our existing boat ramp is right here, about 25 feet from the dam face. So it's really not a safe place to put a boat in. And right now it's not very deep here, so it's not really a very good access. A couple of summers ago, we put in this boat buster, this orange buoy, and it basically blocks boaters from coming down and going over the dam. But it also blocks us from using our boat ramp. We can't go anywhere. So part of the project will be installing a new boat ramp off of Trap Rock, basically where that finished water main was installed. And it'll be a gated access to get to the boat ramp, so it will be for Loudoun Water use only. And the boat ramp will be made of this articulated concrete block. But instead of having grass right up to the edge, we have a large concrete apron that this is going to tie into so it doesn't move. With that, are there any questions on the actual project itself before I move into the bid prices? All right. So there is risk with this project. Obviously in design, we tried to mitigate as many risks as we could, but some of the risks we can't. Environmental risks, we are working in a river. There is a current. The water is flowing, which means that it could flood. There could be high flow times. There could be debris washing down. And that's just inherent in any construction we're going to do in this reservoir. So with marine construction, that's always going to be a risk. Specific to this project, there's a lot of specialty equipment that the contractor is going to use. And when you have specialty equipment, there's a risk. There's a risk of a schedule delay. And some of this equipment is expensive. So there's a risk in that the contractor's not ready for the equipment when it's on the schedule. And then there's just your standard construction risk and schedule delays. Like I said, the pumps at the existing Goose Creek water treatment facility intake pump station are fairly old. There's a risk that they might not start. I mean, we are currently using them because the treatment facility is in standby mode. So, but once we start construction, the pumps just might not start back up once we're finished and we need to test the project. There's rock out there. Obviously, we're on Luckstone property, and we prohibit any blasting within 25 feet of our existing facilities. So that's not going to be as much of a problem on the west bank because we did pre-blast when we put that T in. But on the east bank, we are not 100% sure how much blasting was done to install the existing facility. So they could be doing some hole ramming out there. As usual, weather could be a delay, coordination with Luckstone and with the other contractor that's out there. Another thing that's a little bit interesting for the contractor to deal with is they have to go through trap rock, and we're not just going to give out badges to everybody on their crew. Normally we give out 1 or 2 badges, and the contractor is responsible for moving people through the site to get to the construction. So that's just another thing for them to think about. And then public interest groups, we did our best to mitigate this. Like Pam said, we had to do an extensive permit application to get this job approved. And when we did, we went and reached out to a lot of the public interest groups, the conservation groups, before we submitted so that they would understand what the project was and so that we could tackle any comments before we got there. And I think we did a really good job of that. And we didn't have any comments that went to DEQ when they were approving our permit. So with that said, we put the project out to bid in June. We opened bids August 11th, and we received 3 bids. There's a pretty wide range there. The contract, though, specified some pretty hefty experience requirements. We wanted to make sure that whatever contractor we chose would be qualified for all of those risks I just talked about. We didn't want to put somebody on a moving water body that had no experience doing that previously. So we asked for experience working in water with cofferdams. We asked for experience working with large diameter HDPE, and we asked for experience doing this lay the pipe on the bottom construction that we've never done before. Unfortunately, Shirley withdrew their bid on September 1st. They didn't feel that they could meet those requirements. And so we started negotiating with the next low bidder, Garney. As you can see, Garney's price is quite different than our engineer's estimate. And I have some reasons for that on the next slide. But we did negotiate them down a little bit. We got them to remove about $75,000 just after talking with them about what the project actually was. And we're continuing to work with them on some of their value engineering ideas. However, our contract only allows us 60 days from date of bid open to when the contractor has to keep their price. So we have to bring this to you now, but we're going to continue to try and work that number down during construction. Mr. Sultan, did you have a question?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Shirley Contracting is a big company, and you listed the requirements before the bid. Are you sure they didn't withdraw because they felt they bid too low?
Fairly certain. We worked with them, as you can tell. They didn't withdraw their bid till September 1st, and we opened bids on August 11th. So we gave them multiple chances to try and find the experience throughout their company, and they just couldn't. I mean, the one thing that we asked for about the lay the pipe on the bottom, have you ever laid pipe on the bottom of a water body before, was difficult for them. And they also didn't have the large diameter HDPE experience within the last 7 years, I think is what we were asking for. And so we just didn't feel like they had the experience for this job. I mean, if it was a normal ductile iron job, surely it could do it all day long. But they never said anything about their bid price. I think they felt that that was an okay price for the job.
Just a rhetorical question, knowing all of these requirements, I find it odd that they put in a bid at all. They should have known ahead of time, but I guess that's just a rhetorical question. I have one other question.
Sure.
This is a competitive bid. Are we not opening ourselves up for a protest if we start negotiating a lower cost before we award a contract? Can't the second bidder come in and say, hey, I didn't get a chance to lower my bid?
So if a bid is higher than your budget, which our budget would be our engineer's estimate, then you're allowed to negotiate the cost down to try to get it within the budget. I think is the procurement law. But I've learned a lot about procurement with this bid. So I don't think that they can protest. And because the other bid is so high, I don't think that they would ever negotiate lower than the Garney bid.
Yeah, practically speaking, I wouldn't think they would, but I just wonder if by I think it's good to negotiate, don't get me wrong. I'm just wondering if by negotiating, you're not opening yourself up to a question from the next contractor.
Right.
All right, that's okay.
All right.
I don't have any other questions.
Okay.
This is Mark. I have one quick question.
Sure.
Sorry, I don't have a hands up feature on the phone. Do we have a clause in the contract that says, or do they have a clause in their contract that says because of the increase in pricing of materials, they can increase their fees later on? I just know based on what's going on in construction right now, all the prices are going up astronomically. So I'm just curious if we have that type of, or if they have that type of clause in there that allows them to increase their price.
I have to kick that one to Mr. Stone.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Material and equipment prices are set. There is the provision in our contract allows them to get a time extension. It would be an excusable delay if it's related to the pandemic or other force majeure. That would be an excusable delay. It's not compensable in terms of damages they may incur as a result of the delay itself. But no, the price itself is set. Does that answer your question, Mark?
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Brian. Any other questions on this slide? I did ask Garney if they had their subcontractors yet, and they don't have their finalized list, but they are not using MC Dean, Ms. Sursikar. Just wanted to let you know that I checked into that. So I want to talk about why the engineer's estimate is lower than what we're going to end up paying, I guess. So I have a myriad of reasons here. The bids were pretty widespread. So 3.7, 4.4, and 5.5 million are fairly different. And I think that indicates that the project isn't simple or straightforward. So it's not easy to estimate. Basically, it's a complex project. And then we had a low number of bidders. I'm not 100% sure why we had a low number of bidders. However, when I did do one of these pre-bid meetings, a marine contractor told me that the mobilization cost for them to get from Virginia Beach to here with all of the equipment that they would need wasn't worth the amount of pipe that we were having them install. So there were 3 marine contractors that we specifically reached out to do this job. One in Virginia Beach, one in New Jersey, one in Maryland, and they all decided to not bid the project because of that. Well, I'm assuming because of the high mobilization cost. So this reduced the competition and could have accounted for some higher bid prices. Again, the project has a lot of risk. It's a complex project. the schedule is a concern for the contractors. We did include relatively high liquidated damages in this contract, and that's because it costs us money to keep the Goose Creek Water Treatment Facility in standby. So we included that in the liquidated damages. Because any increase in schedule will help us continue to run the Goose Creek Water Treatment Facility. Excuse me. And so again, those specialized crews and equipment that are necessary to do the job, if the schedule is impacted at all, they're going to be impacted, which is a big risk for the contractor. Then there were two different methods that were acceptable to install this pipe on the bottom of the reservoir. And I told you that all three contractors that bid chose the float and sink method. Well, unfortunately, Hazen chose to price the pull across the bottom method, which could have impacted their engineer's estimate. That being said, I did compare the price per foot of large HDPE pipe jobs. And this project comes in a little bit higher than some of those, but it wasn't astronomically higher. It was still kind of in that same plus or minus area. So I feel like this is a fairly good price considering we're in the middle of a pandemic. So obviously COVID-19 has caused construction prices to increase. If somebody on their crew has to be quarantined, that's a schedule delay. They have additional PPE, their unemployment premiums are going up. It's outside of our control. It's beyond normal construction. So that could also have caused it. But in conclusion, I feel like this is the right project to bolster our source water system. The price is a little bit high, but it's still in line with some of these other projects that we looked at. And it's still less than some of those alternatives that we originally looked at when we were trying to decide how to get water from Goose Creek to Trap Rock. Some of those alternatives were 2 and 3 times this price. So we still feel like this is the best project for us to get direct access to the Beaver Dam Reservoir for Trap Rock, and it provides us with a resilient raw water network. So that's all I had. If you guys have questions, or I can move on to the motion.
I guess we can move on to the motion.
All right. So we're asking for Garney for 4.335 million with a 5% contingency.
What does the rest of the committee think about? I would recommend that this go to action item. Anybody have any other thoughts?
Yeah, it should go to action. It shouldn't go on consent.
Yeah, I agree. This is Keith. I agree.
Okay, good. Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion as displayed on the screen.
I'll second it. Gabby, can we get a roll call?
Roll call vote. Mr. Sultan,
Yes.
Mr. Bonfils,
Yes?
Mr. Moody,
Yes.
Ms. Sursikar.
Yes.
Thank you. Unanimous.
Okay, can we move on to the next item, which is the, I don't see it here, the construction phase services for this job.
Good morning. I'm here to request authorization to issue a task order for construction phase services for the Goose Creek Emergency Water Supply Connection Project. Before I begin the presentation, I want you to know that we are developing a presentation that describes how we actually develop our construction phase engineering task orders. And we are planning to present that here in the next couple of months, sometime this fall. Next month, I have a third quarter report, so I'll be spending some time next month talking about that and how the projects are going so far. But just so you know, that is upcoming. Okay, Michael, do I have to double click?
If you can click on chat and then come
Okay,
back into
yep,
the
yep.
presentation.
Okay, there we go. Okay. Okay. This is the agenda for the presentation. I want to talk a little bit about why we need these construction phase engineering services. I'm going to talk a little bit about the permitting requirements, and this will dovetail with what Pam Kennel talked to you about earlier. I'm going to talk a little bit about shop drawings and submittals on this project because we have some unique shop drawings on the project. The scope of the engineering services, then I'll get into the fee itemization, and then I'll close with the recommended motion. Engineering services are needed really to leverage the engineer's understanding and expertise. Hazen had designed the project. They have the experience in putting in pipelines of this nature, going across water bodies. So by using Hazen and engaging them on this project, we are going to maintain our indemnification protection, and we're also going to maintain continuity, which will provide efficiency and cost effectiveness as well, most economical approach. This is a really unique project for us. In fact, it's the first time that we've ever done subaqueous construction here at Loudoun Water, and it's also the first time that we've had to dredge a body of water as well to perform that construction. So this is a really unique project for us in that way. Plus, we have extensive permitting on the project as well. The engineering services are necessary to help us through all of that. And they, by using the engineer, will leverage their understanding. We'll have their review and administration, and we'll, of course, as I mentioned earlier, maintain their indemnification protection on the project. Just a little bit on permits. I've got the 5 permits listed here. We go from the federal level with the Army Corps nationwide permit down to, we have 3 separate state permits for the project. And then, of course, we have the local Loudoun County grading permit as well. So I've never, this is as many permits as we've certainly ever had on a project. And I can certainly never remember having a Virginia water protection permit on any of the projects that I've worked on here at Loudoun Water. And on that, the Virginia Water Protection Permit, Hazen will be using Wetland Solutions to do as a subconsultant on the project. They will be performing weekly inspections, and they're going to prepare monthly impact reports for us. Hazen will also be reviewing the submittals from the contractor and sharing those with WSSI Wetland Solutions to ensure compliance. And then we'll also have monthly inspections as well. And this is all about ensuring compliance with the permits. And these are when Kathleen mentioned earlier about the length of the permit, or Pam mentioned the length of the permit in the project, those permit requirements are become supplemental conditions in our project here. So that's the sort of thing that also impacts bid results as well as extensive permitting requirements. So while our name is on the permit, we pass those compliance along to the contractor, but we need to ensure that they are complying with that. So we incur those additional costs there, and that really protects us and keeps us in good compliance with the state and the local and federal levels. I want to talk a little bit about submittals because we have some really unique shop drawings on the project, and I've just listed 3 here: a dewatering plan, a dredging plan, and the shoreline excavation. Every one of these submittals requires that they be stamped and sealed by a professional engineer in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So these are really unusual submittals for a project that we do. It's not unusual for us to necessarily get PE stamp submittals, but we don't normally get those to reflect the construction methods that the contractor is planning to use. And so the method of construction determines the ultimate design. As Kathleen mentioned earlier, there's the pull method, and then there's the method that uses the barge, where they float the pipe across and sink it with concrete ballast. And so that determined the ultimate design, and we get a stamped and sealed shop drawing with that. We want to ensure that they're thoughtful about how they are approaching the work, and that they've planned it accordingly in accordance with the contract and also in those permit requirements that I mentioned earlier that are in our supplementary conditions. Any questions on these? Okay, this is a slide that I borrowed from Kathleen's presentation. This is all part of the delegated design, the shop drawing that we'll get. And she mentioned earlier that the contractor's using that float and sink method where they have a ballast weight that they actually put around the pipe. I've got the next slide here will show sort of what that we think that will look like. Of course, they will be submitting that as a shop drawing as well. That will be stamped and sealed by a professional engineer. We're going to get fabrication and layout drawings with that. And then they'll also submit some hydraulic performance testing and wave certification with that. So the engineering requirements that we're placing on the contractor for this project are pretty extensive. We don't see these type of submittals on our normal project. Well, I'm going a little too fast here. Do I have any questions on submittals? Okay, then I'm going to move into the engineering fee as well. These are the basic services that we're proposing to use Hazen for. We've got $174,000 total for basic services. Any questions? The additional services under this task order include specialty testing and inspections, the permitting support that I mentioned with Wetland Solutions, that's $53,000, and then we've got record drawings. So our additional services total $101,000 for the project. And the one thing I'll point out here is the permitting support alone is almost 20% of the total task order amount. And a third of the task order is with subconsultants. So it's not work that Hazen will be performing, but it's performed under them through subconsultants. So I just want to give you an idea of, the cost here and how we looked at it and how we had to develop this task order.
Brian, Mr. Sultan has his hand up.
Okay.
Yeah, on the dredging plan and the other two plans, do you guys outline a format or do you just leave it up to the contractors to what they put in that plan?
We do not have, we specify the requirements of the plan, and the format is up to them. There's not a template that we've included in the contract for them to fill out for their submittal. No.
So the spec does call out what information you want included.
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay, that's my only question.
Okay. Okay, so these are the total costs for this. Shop drawings are just under 2% of the construction contract total, and I bring that up only because as a follow-on to our discussion a couple of weeks ago about the Cortland pump station project. The clarifications are at just 0.2% of the overall construction contract value. In as much as you may want to look at this in the context of the construction cost itself. The total task order amount is $275,000, which is 6.2% of the construction contract cost.
Hey, Brian.
Yes.
This is Mark on the phone. Hey, Marty, I, as you know, I'm very passionate about the CA services by professional engineers, and I spent a lot of time talking with Roddy on this, and I fully support this price. It's right in line with what needs to be done. Just wanted to tell you that. Thanks.
That's good. That's good to hear.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kobles. So I've got the recommended motion in front of you there.
I'll ask the rest of the committee, but I'm thinking that since the other item went for action item, this should probably go for action item also. Anybody have any thoughts?
I agree.
Yep.
Could somebody make a motion?
I'll make the motion. And I want to appreciate Mark asking and answering the question that about whether these were in line. The 6.2% was in line. So I'll go ahead and make the motion as stated on the screen.
Second. Gabby, can we have a roll call?
Roll call vote. Mr. Sultan,
Yes.
Mr. Bonfils,
Yes.
Mr. Muti,
Yes.
Ms. Sursikar.
Yes.
Thank you. Unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Next, the capital spending report.
Good morning. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to ask them. The capital spending report is shown in front of you.
I don't have anything. I just noticed that the actual monthly expenditures are starting to bend downward, but only slightly. Anybody else have any thoughts, questions? Nope, sounds like you're okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Wait for the agenda.
I don't see the agenda in front of me, but I think that was the last item. Is that true?
That is the last item.
If that was the last item, can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion to adjourn. It's Keith.
This is Marty, I second. Roll call?
Roll call vote. Mr. Sultan,
Yes.
Mr. Bonfils,
Yes.
Mr. Muti,
Yes.
Ms. Sursikar.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion passed. Thank everybody for attending, and thank you, Mark, for interjecting. It makes it a lot easier.